Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. How are you, Marina?
I'm sad to be parted from you.
Yeah, I'm in like a lockdown situation because I've got a slight cold and I don't want to infect anybody.
Richard is under laboratory conditions, as they used to say in game shows where they put people in a sort of glass box. But I can still see him.
Listen, Happy New Year, sort of.
Yes, Happy New Year.
And listen, if it's anything like 2024, it's going to be a belter.
Most certainly. Now, what are we going to talk about today?
We're talking about Squid Game, Netflix's biggest ever franchise, which is back. Started on Boxing Day. We're talking about that. Talking about heroes and villains of the year, our heroes and villains of the year.
Yes, I've compiled mine in a slightly odd way. You'll be thrilled to know.
You surprised me.
And we are also talking about New Year's TV and how things have changed, how the scheduling of things has changed, and what New Year's TV means. It's a big slot now.
It's essentially the biggest day of the year.
Let us kick off with Squid Game, as you say, Netflix's biggest ever show, which returned on Boxing Day, and they've dropped all the episodes at once, and it is a return to the death game.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's obviously very, very bleak.
Yeah.
There are certain things that they've changed in the format of their in-show game that the players can vote to leave. The majority can split the money.
Listen, it's important you change the format in the second series. We all know that. Just the things you learned from the first series, you can put into play. Yeah.
Otherwise, the death is not fun anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be fun.
You need to keep that death fresh. So the creator, Hwang Don-hyuk, who he's so extraordinary, Richard, isn't he? Because he writes and directs every single episode of this thing, as he did in the first season. In the first season, he lost loads of teeth and stuff, didn't he?
Well, yes, that's the interesting thing is when he's making the first season, and anyone who watched the first season, it's an extraordinary undertaking. But the one thing, of course, they didn't know when they were making it was that it was going to be a hit. They had no idea that it was going to be successful. They certainly had no idea it was going to be the biggest show in the world, and Netflix's biggest ever show, and Netflix's most successful, most profitable ever show as well. So he was putting himself through all of that, losing teeth and so on, absolutely on a wing and a prayer. And when they came back to him and said, well, we'd love to do a second series and a third series, they filmed both at once.
Yeah.
I think his initial response was, oh, but I don't want to. Because it took so much out of me. But the interesting thing with Netflix is when you sign up to do a show with Netflix, you don't own it, so you don't have a back end. So the fact that had been so successful, actually there wasn't a huge amount of payoff for Hwang Dong-hyuk, other than it makes him look great.
It's one of the many, many ironies in this show about the sort of brutality of late stage capitalism that he didn't really properly make that much money from it.
I mean, he would have made. He'd have made $250,000 or something, which is very, very nice to have. But this new season, I'd imagine he's making $10 million a season for both of them. I would have thought he'd be on $20 million odd. That's tooth fairy money. Lose 9 teeth, get $20 million. That's a deal you'd take, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he can buy us some new teeth, certainly. I think it's very interesting. I want to talk a bit about the show and why it's so compelling and popular. There's lots of, and internationally so as well. Obviously, K-drama is very big, but for me, it's really interesting to learn that he was, when he was coming up with the idea, he read lots of comic books in the survival game genre and the gambling genre, which is obviously relatively niche sort of comic books.
Is there a gambling comic book genre?
Yeah.
I'm interested.
I couldn't believe that. Yeah, I know you would.
Yeah.
It's right up your strasse.
Yeah.
There's something about it that obviously Netflix wants shows that are, it's that very simplistic and stylized. It's almost theatrical in some ways, the sort of the very simple and very clear themes. And you can see how easy it is to sell into sort of all territories, really, or for people to appreciate it in all territories. I found myself watching it. I'm told that I don't want to sort of besmirch the script, but I am because I'm told that the subtitles are quite poorly translated, and that Koreans are like, you're missing a lot of the subtlety. Because to me, it is a very, very simplistic script, and it helps to me that I'm seeing it in another language. It's not an Anglophone thing, because I think some of the stuff might be too on the nose.
Yeah.
When I'm reading the subtitles. However, I don't know if that's a sort of something's been lost in translation there. But I think the reason that it is so compelling and so popular is that it speaks very much it says something much wider about its times, of which the world is going through it. But South Korea is a very extreme example of lots of these different things. Since that first season aired, obviously, martial law was recently declared in South Korea and then undeclared.
That's a Squid Game round, isn't it? Declaring and undeclaring martial law within 11 minutes.
The birth rate is something like 0.8 per couple. There's a big movement, which now people are sort of saying they're going to fall in with in the United States, but of women saying that if my rights and my body and my feminism isn't respected, I'm not going to have sex with anybody. That's a movement that started in South Korea. Obviously, there is massive economic disparity between classes, and there is a sense that you can't, that there's no point, and that you don't have a stake in capitalism, and you're never really going to get one. There's even a K-pop singer in this one. It's like he's trying to just indict the whole of society, which I thought was like, there's nobody left unscathed. One thing I found really interesting in this one is just how much younger the contestants are. And this was obviously a big, big hit amongst young people, the show, including, sadly to say, among some of my children who were much too young to watch it, but unfortunately have, because I'm a terrible parent.
Really? They watched it? Do they love it?
No, not my youngest, but
right.
my two boys that watched it, and they absolutely love it.
They are 4 and 6, right?
They are. They're 14 and 12. They are obsessed with it. They absolutely love it. But it's interesting. Hwang Dong-hyuk said that he thought that in order for people to have that much debt, that i.e. that's what would make you play the game within the story, is you'd have to be older. But he said, and also to be at a place in life where you feel you have no other hope. And the really bleak thing between series 1 and many bleak things, I'm going to overuse the word bleak again, but between series 1 and series 2 is that he feels that you can now be at a place where young people obviously feel they have absolutely no stake in capitalism, and that there's no means of getting one via labour.
It is a wonderful allegory for late stage capitalism, isn't it? It is one of those things that in 50 years' time, when we look back at the revolution, we'll say, well, this was an early sign of it, wasn't it? This guy losing all these teeth, making a show about rich people toying with people in debt, which, by the way, is capitalism. That's all capitalism is, but with added game show.
It's really interesting that the things that have happened and made people get into this sort of situation, I don't know, crypto investment, online gambling. I remember last year on the tube, I saw this sign on the tube, an advert on the British subway, London tube.
The British subway, you call it?
The British subway. Sorry, I wasn't trying to say that I was in South Korea and I'd seen this advert on the South Korean subway. I'm talking about the London one. It had a picture of this guy and it said, "With all the money I make renting out my driveway, I barely even think about the £1,376 I lost in crypto." I was like, wow. Well, it's all up there. It's all up there on the advert, isn't it?
It's a sort of advert that if you showed it to your parents in 1978 and said this will be an advert in 30 years' time, they'd be like, I can't understand any of those words.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Another thing that he's done is put characters, because there was a couple in the first one, and he sort of threw that story away a little bit, and then latterly came, because so many people said, but what was the story, how did those people get into the game together, whatever, that there are more people with existing relationships, familial or romantic within the game, which is what obviously one way of sort of testing his whole kind of concept of how anything can survive, and whether there's any possibility for sort of collective action at all within this system. But to me, it's interesting that obviously there've always been these shows that are, or films particularly, where the future is a death game. And I don't know, whatever it is, Rollerball, Running Man, or Death Race 2000, or any of those things where the future is set up as a game, and sometimes Hard Target, even people being killed for sport. But it's always set in the future. Under a corrupt government.
Yes, it is. Yes, this is fascinating in that the dystopia seems very of the present day, and it's not saying imagine a world in which it's kind of going. You could sort of see it. It's fascinating that having made the first one, it's interesting that thing, as I say, of when you make something you don't know it's a hit, and suddenly he's making episode 2. And he knows that it's a huge, huge, huge hit. And what he chooses to do with the story, and what he chooses to do really with the story, is to give some of the players a bit more agency, and to our hero from the first series coming back and sort of trying to stop the games, really trying to get people to to team up, trying to get people to defeat the bosses.
He set it up as a sort of duel between the front man and Jihan, so that yes, trying to see whether acting as a collective can make any impact on it.
I mean, history tells us it can't, but we shall have to see this. I do think it's great. I do think that it's very, very hard to follow up such a huge hit. 330 million viewers the first Squid Game had. I think 2.8 billion hours of viewing. So that's a big hit by anybody's standard. And to come back, and I like the fact it comes back in quite a dour way. I like the fact that it's not immediately kind of, people in tracksuits being gunned down. It's the windswept streets of Seoul and what have you. And they were always very good at that in the first series, is you think it's going to be a series of games, but actually they go outside of that precinct quite often, and they show real life.
Can I talk about Netflix's monetization of it? I mean, Sarandos on that earnings call, whenever it was, said the Squid Game universe has just begun. They have a multiplayer game. They're going to have an English language version of it, which I think David Fincher is going to direct, and maybe Dennis Kelly's going to write it. I don't know. And obviously they had Squid Game, the challenge, the actual game that they played based on it. Now, we did that quite early on when we first started this podcast, and when we had watched it, then there was quite some distance between us watching the game show version of it and then watching the dystopian drama. And I slightly feel like I did find it, as I think I said at the time, sort of really quite grim that they had capitalized on a drama that was about the kind of rapaciousness of capitalism. But anyway.
Whereas I didn't mind it. I always think,
you didn't mind it.
Yeah, but
that's what I want to ask you.
Say that the century is about the rapaciousness of capitalism. Strike it lucky.
Yeah, but to do it in the way they did. Yes, I get that. I get all of that. But when I watched it that time, there was some distance between the transmission of the drama and seeing this kind of quite revolutionary game show, really. Now I have seen the drama again. I'm like, I cannot actually believe that this show about the race to the bottom of late stage capitalism has become a franchise. I found that irony too heavy. When I was watching it again, I kept thinking, I cannot believe they've turned this into an actual game show. It felt different.
The game show doesn't worry me particularly because, it's a drama. Like, it's made up and these people are actors, and however much we might like to think it reflects the world in which we live, it's a piece of dramatic television. The weird thing, I think, is they have lots of live experiences now. Like, in the same way you can do Taskmaster live and, you can turn up and play some silly games, you can turn up and play Squid Game live in America. And that feels peculiar. Would you like to come along to a big warehouse and take part in the game where, people essentially die? And you think, oh, yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. You think that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll take the kids.
Why is it? Is it because the game... Okay, is that because... I find it absolutely beyond depressing that they've made trying to make a sort of Marvel product out and an extended universe out of something which is supposed to be a sort of searing indictment of all of that. Is it that people just love the games, and that the games obviously are based on fun childhood games and, going out or being eliminated?
But do your kids watch Squid Game and think it's a searing indictment of capitalism?
I think they think it's pretty unbelievably depressing, yes.
But they love it.
Yeah, yes. Well, I mean, people... It's very affecting. It really gets them. I think it is quite simplistic, and it's very, very affecting. Yeah, they think it's absolutely intense and amazing. But yeah, they think it's very depressing.
Can we watch another one? Just one more, please.
Yeah. Oh, they can't control themselves to watch one.
And it's interesting. Some of the brand hookups that Squid Game has put together, like Tottenham Hotspur. Over Christmas had loads of adverts. They had all the guards sort of going around the Spurs stadium for photo opportunities, and the large mechanical doll. And you just think, there's two things happening here. Most of the people listening to this would accept that Squid Game is a satire on capitalism and a satire on people who don't have a stake in society. But is that what this show is seen as culturally, or is it that cool show with the tracksuits where they play the games? And if it's that, then you can have all sorts of brand hookups, and they have got all sorts of brand hookups. I think that it is quite a niche view that we are watching a satire, and we're watching something about what on earth has happened to us as a society. I think when you get to the amount of people watching this 330 million, I think you probably got 300 million people there.
Well, has he failed then? If it's a niche view, has he failed? Because that's what he explicitly says it is.
Well, if that's what he's tried to do...
He couldn't have been more sledgehammer about it, in my view. I don't think it's a particularly subtle show.
I agree, but at the same time, he's taken it to Netflix. And, you know, he presumably has agreed to a lot of these brand hookups.
Don't hate the player.
Yep, don't hate exactly that. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So I think that people are very, very able to compartmentalize a television program. And I think that with Squid Game, I think while one part of them could go, no, it's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, if you think about it, it's sort of true. But at the same time, you go, oh my God, it was so cool when they were on the glass bridge. And that, I think, trumps the latter trumps the former.
The other thing I was interested in, the sort of Netflix side of it, because I've been talking to quite a lot of different TV producers about making shows for Netflix. And it's been quite interesting, the way that you get notes if you're building a drama. And what they'll say to you is, oh, we need a twist in episode 4 because the algorithm shows us that people at the end of episode 4, people who are a bit iffy about it will just stop watching at that particular point. So you're not really arguing with... And so I wanted to see what happened at the end of episode 4 of this. Look, people won't have watched it all, so I'm not going to discuss stuff. But you're starting if you have those kind of conversations with producers, I'm now starting to be able to see the really clear bones of not just like how they've done it in this show, but the actual template, because all episode 4s have whatever it is. And if you talk to producers about it, they say, obviously, if you get a note about something, all notes are good in that either you say, no, this is exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to do, and let me argue more compellingly than I obviously did on the first draft why this works. But you can't argue with this type of note because you're arguing with a computer. So it also made me realise that it's one of the many things that's made me realise that executives' jobs are going. I know everyone thought that writers' jobs were going with AI, but if the level of the note is the algorithm says this is what's got to happen at this point and this is why, then you don't really need someone very, very highly paid to deliver that.
Well, interestingly, I'm going to be talking about that in our heroes and villains section in a moment.
Oh, are you? Oh, okay, good. That's
indeed.
okay. Well, I'm going to hold that then in that case. The other thing, just one more little point about compliance, which I had at Netflix, which we have talked about before because of Baby Reindeer. They spoke to that person again. Someone has found that person again who, because they put a real phone number in the first season, this guy was getting up to 4,000 calls a day asking to take part in the game. So that was another compliance triumph for Netflix. But also, they have now, I think, in the subsequent, they eventually painted it out. But yes.
Despite the dystopia and despite the fact that it's perhaps becoming the thing that it was intended to satirize, I thought it was great this second season. So we should have said that up the top, really, because it's great TV.
It's iconic and it's absolutely of the age, and I think it's sort of unmissable. I think you have to see it. Now, we are going to talk about our heroes and villains of the year.
2024.
Yeah, of 2024.
That specific year.
Yes, we're not going to do preemptive ones, although, I would still pick Cole Palmer. It's not even close.
Let's end it there.
Let's end. Okay, well, first of all, he is a cultural artefact who should be placed in the British Museum, a non-looted one, which is nice.
You want to put Cole Palmer in the British Museum?
Not really.
No.
I want him. But he is a cultural highlight without any question. He's also got that thing. Actually, speaking of, he has got that thing that all celebrities dream of, that you can be just incredibly offhand and monosyllabic in an interview, and instead of everyone, because you're so good at what you do, that instead of everyone sort of hating you, they call it an art form and they love you even more. So in that sense,
I should point out to a large number of our viewers that Cole Palmer is a Chelsea footballer.
Yeah, I mean, he's so much more than that, but he's a cultural highlight of the year. Sorry, but he wasn't actually formally one of my cultural highlights of the year, or my heroes and villains. Why don't you tell me? I've done mine in a funny way, so why don't you tell me?
Oh, have you? Oh no, do yours then. If you've got them in a funny way, that's very entertaining for me.
No.
So not Cole Palmer.
No. I think that one heroic thing we've seen in entertainment this year is the idea of like being messy. People actually people have loved things like Charlie XCX, the whole brat thing, that whole vibe of that I've just sort of seen described as mess. And those sort of organic stars who don't seem super polished, like Chapel Row and Serena Carpenter, they're not really ordained by Vogue any longer, these people, and they don't appear to have these kind of really kind of meticulous publicity machines. The internet sort of chooses them. And I suppose my villains, in contrast to those, would be the people who have been really overly polished. So you see someone like J-Lo, who had, she had like 2 films, a tour was announced. She said she launched a skincare line, claimed she'd never used Botox. Cocktails line, she said she didn't drink. There's that sort of taking your fans for granted, and also just being too much. Katy Perry, in her sort of faux feminist return, a kind of lazy attempt to resell fans what you'd sold them before, obviously being produced by Dr. Luke and Kesha. I think there was something so kind of, they seemed really out of time, those stars, and they were just, it was too much orchestration, and that sort of sense of a campaign like the Brat Summer or whatever that felt so organic and slightly chaotic, just was so much more in keeping with the energy of the times.
It does feel refreshing, doesn't it? I wonder sometimes how much of it is stage managed, and I wonder how much of it is planned. And I actually think the truth is not a huge amount of it is. I think there is chaos involved, and I think there is agency from the stars themselves in a way that there didn't used to be. I mean, maybe Madonna had agency, but hard to think of too many other stars of that era who did. And now, Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, Chapel Row, and just huge new star after huge new star who seem to have some level of control over their career. I mean, it all comes down to Taylor, of course, and the trail that she blazed. So she's kind of the ultimate hero in a funny kind of way. But it's lovely to see. I mean, Sabrina Carpenter's year. I mean, she was number 1 for about 30 weeks. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely nuts what she's managed to do. Can I, with my heroes and villains of the year, I'm just going to talk about, I think we talk an awful lot about the actors and stars of things and less about the people behind the scenes. So we've talked a lot about Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. And in the public kind of, if you look at it in a public way, you think wonderful Toby Jones and Monica Dolan. But Polly Hill, who commissioned it at ITV, didn't have to.
I put all these down as well.
No.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, that's
yeah.
good. Polly,
yeah.
I was going to say, so Polly Hill and Gwyneth Hughes, who wrote the thing. When you look back on successes, they seem obvious. You think, oh, well, of course, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office is obvious. And of course you would commission a drama about the post office scandal, but it's not obvious at all. And that's, when we talked about execs and what it is that they do. And sometimes the thing that they do is absolutely just get the scent of something and not let it go until they've got something on screen. And that's what Polly Hill and Gwyneth Hughes did. And I think amazing performances.
And Patrick Spence, who produced it. I really do agree on ITV for commissioning it. And I do think that we've said before, it's interesting how many of the things, and there's so few dramas that have actually changed policy or changed public opinion to such an extent that policy then gets changed down the years. And a lot of them have been on ITV and a couple on Channel 4. And in a funny kind of way, less on the BBC, because the BBC is quite often in a sort of toxic relationship with whoever the government of the day is, and I think there is a reticence about poking the bear in lots of ways. But knowing, as ITV did, that a drama about the British Post Office is not going to be sold to all sorts of other foreign streamers, and to still go ahead with it because they just thought that it was an amazing and extraordinary story that had to be told. And talking about sort of the behind the scenes people, the people who wrote that story, Nick Wallace and covered it, Nick Wallace at the BBC, Rebecca Thompson at Computer Weekly, Private Eye, those people were so overjoyed by, at no stage did they say, oh my God, I've been trying to write about this for years and this one TV drama and everything changed. They were just completely overjoyed with whatever got it over the line. And everybody involved in that story was so grateful to to that drama for doing what it did.
And listen, we all know that Alan Bates is a hero, but this is an entertainment podcast, so we have to nominate as our heroes the people who actually brought it to screen. And on a similar note, I think so. Netflix is a very interesting place, and it got to a point where Netflix suddenly had an awful lot less money, and everyone was saying, "Oh God, Netflix is going to be in trouble. You know, it's going to be hard for them to commission stuff." And I think Anne Menser, who runs the UK side of drama over there, she started the year with "Fool Me Once," the Harlan Coben adaptation, which was a huge worldwide hit. I mean, massive, one of the biggest shows in the history of Netflix. She ended the year with Black Doves, which, if you haven't watched it, is terrific. And in between that, she had The Gentleman, your favourite. She had One Day, and she had Baby Reindeer. So she had these huge worldwide hits, that's one after the other. And that's not what you are supposed to do. It is supposed to be very hard to do that. And however much we talk about the algorithm and AI and Netflix shows must be a certain thing in a certain way, you do have to have extraordinary judgment to work out that all these very, very different shows, some not based on IP at all, some based on a book, or they all come from different places, to have that level of, hit rate within 1 year is very, very unusual. And all of those shows have extraordinary talent behind them. The Gentleman, I accept you may not agree, but so there's lots of people who are responsible for the hits.
Listen, people loved it. People loved The Gentleman, and I just have to accept that. They were wrong. But
Anne Menser being across all of them, you have to go, at some point, you have to go, there may be a common denominator here. So I would say she's another hero of the year for just having hit after hit after hit. And that is very, very difficult to do, as anyone who's ever made telly will tell you.
My villain has been sort of lazy puff promotion. I think we're starting to see a real sea change in how things are promoted and what's expected of people. And any sort of celebrities or stars who are attached to big things who don't get the vibe right or don't look like they're really trying, there can be a big backlash. And I'd say someone like, you saw that with Blake Lively, where she was in this film that It Ends With Us, the Colleen Hoover adaptation, that did really, really well. You know, her character's a florist, and so she kept telling everyone she was wearing florals every time she sat down. She launched a sort of hair care thing and some drinks thing, and she kept, so it was this very bright and breezy tour. It is basically a movie about domestic violence, and there was such a backlash to sort of, I just don't understand why you haven't read your own room. Whereas my heroes for this, it can only be those two girls of the Wicked press tour. Because they left it all out there, Richard. Pure, unfiltered celebrity emotion. You don't feel they're trying to sell you anything other than the specific thing they're trying to sell you. It was chaos in some ways. There was a moment where a fan had photoshopped the poster so it looked exactly like the iconic one from the musical, where you see the Cynthia Erivo's character, the brim of her hat obscures her face. She went absolutely nuts and said this is erasure. This is what erasure looks like. And then later I just saw her rowing it back and saying, yeah, no, I think I should have just WhatsApped some friends instead. But as I say, it was all out there. You didn't believe that you were getting a spiel. You just felt like, for better or for worse, that was truly them. And I think that, again, it's related to this idea of mess and authenticity.
Authenticity is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lack of polish.
Yeah,
a certain sort of a rawness that is not that unbelievably curated sort of sense of a selling machine speaking to you.
Very much like our Royal Albert Hall show.
Yeah. Which was
a sense of poorly controlled chaos.
Yeah. No one could have accused it of being polished.
My villain of the year, and there's only one possible answer, one of the greatest villains in the history of British television. And you know what? A villain, all the more so because we absolutely loved him. And that's Harry from The Traitors.
Oh, God. I mean, what a star.
And he was, for all the people who go into that show just going, listen, I've got a game plan. I'm actually going to ace this. And they fall apart so quickly. And Harry the wheels never came off. If anything, he added wheels as the show went along. And the final,
he was the Cole Palmer of traitors.
Yes, he really was. And the final episode with him and Molly, who now have made up, which of course, because how could you ever stay cross at Harry, was one of the great betrayals in British TV history. It really was just an incredible ending, and I think really cemented the place of traitors as one of the absolute jewels of British television. I thought he was one of the greatest villains of all time.
It was like watching an athlete, exactly for that reason, as you say, because people always say, I've got this and a that, and actually, life takes over and it's much more complicated than you think. To be that age and to just see it through to the end, amazing. I really want to know what he does next. Yes, that was amazing. For a villain, can I say toxic fandoms? Because I think they've got worse. And I think some of the things we saw, obviously Chapel Roan said, people have not given me any space and I can't, this is horrible. They've become, over the last years, even the studios are starting to say that it's becoming so organised that they can bury things. They buried The Acolyte, the Star Wars fandom buried The Acolyte. That episode, the House of the Dragon, where two female characters kiss, there was like they were review bombed. Any non-white character in the Rings of Power, you can see all these particular types of fandoms, and they get completely taken apart. And the silent majority who loves these shows and loves these films or love whatever it is massive, but they are very powerful, the toxic fandoms. And it's really interesting talking to people who are making television, for making shows where they know there's a difficult fandom. And they're having to do, what they're doing now is, I was talking to someone the other day about this and I thought this is absolutely wild. They're doing testing with super fans. They get focus group. I know. This way madness lies. I know. They get super fans to do sort of focus groups. You're having to put your talent into social media boot camp so that they know how to deal with it. And quite often you're having to take over your talent's accounts when things go wrong and they just cannot deal with the barrage. And security firms to sort of counter people being doxxed. Toxic fandoms are sort of out of control and they're starting to have a big effect on the creative process. And people will actually even admit to it now. Although they don't want to say they'll admit to you that it's having an effect internally, but they can't say out loud because that will only make it worse.
Social media really changed how television was made because there was this immediate feedback. In the old days, you'd get a couple of letters into the BBC duty log and they pass them on when they were nice. But social media, you get such immediate reaction, and it would be a very small group of people, and it would absolutely change the way commissioners would talk to you about your own show, and it would be included in their notes. It would be, a lot of people are saying, you think, no, a lot of people are not saying, because we've got 2 million viewers, and it's 5 people on Twitter.
6 of the worst people on the internet have said this one thing.
Look through the rest of what they do. But, also just, you absolutely start legislating for the worst people in the world when you make TV shows. I think we've slightly got out of the other side of that now. I hope so. I think people have come to understand that social media is not actually the people who are watching your television show.
The trouble is that's when it's a fandom, that is very, very difficult because they control so much of I can't believe I'm going to use the word discourse, but I am. It's out there. But they do control so much of the discourse, whether or not you're aware of it, about the new show that's coming down the stream from whatever sort of big brand it is, maybe whether it's Star Wars or Tolkien or whatever it is. And I think it's very difficult with them. But my hero in this fan area would have to be the lookalike competitions, which I keep trying to talk to you about. I love the lookalike competitions. This is when someone will set up a prize and say, there is a $50. I don't think the prize has ever been more than £50 or $50. Come to whichever park dressed as either, Timothy Chalamet or Glenn Powell. If you think you're a lookalike, or for Harry Styles or whatever it is, they almost all end up causing some sort of public order issue because there's so many people come.
So someone literally says, I'll give you £50 if you look like Timothy Chalamet. I'll give you £50 if you come to the park.
If you the person who of all the people who come, so many of them came. Timothy Chalamet himself came down. That was what partially caused the public order thing. Glenn Powell, there's been one for Glenn Powell. Yeah, I've got him in at the end of the year, hero, obviously. And he's offered the winner of his a small cameo in his next movie. But it's taken off in all sorts of cities around the world. These have happened.
I feel like this could be abused. It's essentially for the price of £50, you can get anyone in a city who looks like the most handsome man in the world to come and meet you in the park.
The joke's on everyone. Everyone enjoys it, and it's not a huge prize. But what it is that it's a form of live gathering, and I think that's absolutely lovely. Live is. As our lives are more and more kind of mediated by machines, I think it's great. If anyone wants to turn up to a park dressed as Timothy Chalamet in a really benign and lovely way and $50 if they're the best, then that is lovely. That is a nice fandom.
How do you dress as Timothy Chalamet?
Well, I mean, he's been in some movies where they have quite distinctive costumes. Okay. So, if you've got a purple coat, you're halfway there, aren't you?
I'm not sure I've seen a Timothy Chalamet film.
Okay, well, he is the biggest young star in the world.
He's in Little Women, wasn't he?
Maybe next year. Yeah. What about June? Have you seen June?
No, I won't. It's not my cup of tea.
No, I won't do that
because it feels a bit sci-fi and it's quite long.
You won't have seen. It's very good. You won't have seen Wonka. I know that.
No.
Call Me by My Name back in the day.
I have seen Wonka, but I've seen it with Gene Wilder. Call Me by My Name. I've seen. Yes. Okay. I've seen a couple of Timothy.
He's
Chalamet
the one who
films.
isn't the cannibal. I'm joking, Armie Hammer. I know you've withdrawn from.
Who, of course, is one of your heroes of the year.
No, he's not one of my heroes of the year. Although I did notice Armie Hammer, who you may remember had to withdraw from public life after a sort of, I want to say, cannibalism fantasy scandal. I don't think he did actually eat anyone, but he did suggest he might like to. He's now got a podcast. I mean, like all humans in the year 2024, he's got a podcast. And actually, one of the first guests, I sent you a story about this. I don't know if you actually opened that email. I like to think some of my emails, you just think, no, I'm not doing that. He had his mother was his second guest on his podcast. Big energy, yeah. And on it, she revealed that she had recently bought him for his birthday a vasectomy.
Really?
I am enjoying his slow progress back to the centre of public life, Richard. So
that's bad to the second episode to have your mum as your guest.
I think she was actually, sorry, if I'm wrong, if anyone has actually listened to this podcast, I haven't yet, I need to. I think she's episodes 2 and 3.
Really?
They've split her into a 2-parter. Anyhow, please hit me with one of your heroes or villains.
Well, of course, the other villains, and there's a whole load of them, which is the many men who have disappeared from our screens this year. And I was interested to see that Greg Wallace's replacement on Celebrity MasterChef, at least, is Grace Dent. And it feels like next year, every single job is just going to be given to a woman, because why take the risk of not? No woman's ever really lost her job for no female presenter's ever lost her job for doing anything. And there's so many of the men that you just think, just let women present everything.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because, of course, for so many years, we used to hear, that women are too emotional to do these jobs. Now I'm slightly feeling, I don't know, I just feel that men are too emotional, their flibbity-gibbet behaviour. Perhaps they're not suited. Perhaps they should be suited to gentler jobs.
Well, I think because of their hormones.
The hormones has become a thing, hasn't it? It's difficult. I've got a huge amount of time for men, but I really have.
Cole Palmer, for sure.
Cole Palmer to present everything. No, not just Cole Palmer, just to continue playing for Chelsea. But I think it has come down to a hormonal issue. They're just too hormonal.
I think it's right. I think you need people who.
You need someone strong.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah.
You need someone strong.
You need someone steadfast.
And, no offence to the weaker sex, none at all. And, I've got of course there should be jobs for them in television.
There should, there absolutely should be some. And listen, I'm speaking as a man, in my position as a man.
Oh, shit. I didn't realise.
Yeah. No, don't worry about that. Like 98% of all podcasters, I am a man. I would say, if you've got a female presenter, you just there's so much in television now about how you exploit your back catalogue and how you build up libraries of television programs which you can sell forever and ever and ever. And just financially, if I have a woman presenting a show, I know that I can sell that show forever. Whereas with a man, you never know. You never know with those guys, do you? and that sometime in 5 years or 10 years time, suddenly your back
You could have
catalogue is
bought a
worth
bad
nothing.
one.
Yeah. And listen, there are some good ones for sure. There must be 2 or 3 of them, but by and large, yeah, let's give the Grace Dents the jobs. So I'm going to say my heroes of the year: Polly Hill, Gwyneth Hughes, and Anne Mensah. Obviously, lots of people, also behind the scenes there, but I will go for those 3. And my villains of the year: the wonderful Harry Clark and the less wonderful 17 to 18% of all male television presenters.
My heroes of the year were celebrities being messy, villains, celebrities being overly polished, another villain, lazy sort of puff promotion stuff, and a hero, the ladies of the Wicked Press Tour. Yes, please. Villain, toxic fandoms, and hero, fan lookalike competitions.
Giving money to people to come and meet you in the park. Now, we spoke about Christmas Day television last week. And by the way, there's some absolute crackers, I thought. But funnily enough, New Year's Day television is the biggest TV of all. So depending on when you're listening to this, actually, that's interesting. If you listen to this a day late, it'll be a year later.
And by the way, you missed an incredible lineup last night on iPlayer, but you can catch up on iPlayer. On BBC One, they had an incredible lineup. Okay. This is what I will be doing. 6 p.m, Gladiators Celebrity Special. 7 p.m, there's a Gavin and Stacey doc. I will actually be switching over to BBC Two for the first half hour to watch Richard Osman's Festive House of Games.
That's about to be renamed Grace Dent's House of Games, but carry on.
8 p.m, first episode of The Traitors.
Yeah.
And 9 p.m, first episode of Season 2 of SAS Rogue Heroes, which Stephen Knight wrote, which I absolutely loved. I thought it was brilliant. So keep it locked, basically, on BBC One on that night. But that is a huge night of television. They've put some of their biggest things there. And I think it's quite interesting because everyone, this has now become the biggest slot of the year. Everyone's broke and knackered, and they're staying in as of New Year's Day. Commercial spend has actually come back at this point. I found this quite intuitive, talking to somebody involved in this, that they find it, advertisers don't really bother advertising between the 23rd of December and the 1st of January. So even though you've got these big shows, supposedly over Christmas, people have sort of judged to have spent all their money and not be doing anything at that point. So in a funny kind of way, it's almost irresponsible to put your biggest shows on then, because you want to save them for when the commercial spend is coming back in January. And it's become this, all the big shows come then.
Yeah, and Netflix as well join in. The new Harlan Coben Missing You comes out on New Year's Day as well. And it can mean 2 things. It can cement your place in the pantheon. So Traitors coming out on New Year's Day is the BBC saying, this is the absolute jewel in our crown. But funnily enough, Rogue Heroes, which did well, but didn't go over the top, didn't go crazily well, that suddenly it's everyone's favourite show. This is the BBC saying, no, this is the show that we absolutely believe in, and we're going to stick it off the back of Traitors. We're going to stick it off the back of this whole evening of great telly, and everyone's sort of, watching this amazing stuff. And it's their way of saying, this is the show, which they did with Traitors last year. It's a very similar idea, to just knock it onto the next level of TV viewing.
Yes, and they've got what it also gives you, this particular slot. It's difficult that TV is so obsessed with year on year, because ITV are never going to have that great period again where they had Mr. Bates versus the Post Office last year, and there was no major news event. And so the front page of every newspaper every day was about, this Post Office scandal you're maybe watching a drama about on TV. So you had this constant sort of feedback loop of promotion for that. But you can strip things very easily. Stripping is when you sort of show it either every single night, or Traitors are doing a thing where they're showing them Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of every week. But it's massive for linear, and it's a reminder that these are the big shows, and they are watched far, far more than anything on streamers. Remember that, with the exception of Squid Game, which is, as we know, Netflix's most successful show of all time, that is the most successful, and I remember it was the 10th most watched in the audience ratings that week in the UK.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and you'd think it was the biggest, but it's just nice every now and again for linear TV to flex its muscles, and this is a day where it can really do it. This is like a carnival for linear TV. Even ITV have got the last season of Vera on as well, which has been a huge hit, brilliantly made as well. They've got that. It's just terrestrial TV just saying, we're still here, and we can still bring in a big audience, and we can still make great telly, and it's worth having a little celebration of that, I think.
They've got 2 big dramas coming up as well, ITV've got like a big James Norton thing, which is a kind of weird psychological thing, which will be great. Martin Clunes in a kind of British Breaking Bad. I think he's a sort of farmer on the Welsh borders.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. I will. Yeah, playing against time.
Marina, you have me at Martin Clunes.
Yeah, and is a farmer in a British Breaking Bad. Yes, please. So they've got all of these things coming, but it as you say, they can really make people gather round in that time because people are staying in, and it just so suits the times.
Can we next week do a proper review of Traitors? Because I'm very excited about it.
Oh my God, I'm genuinely beside myself. Yes, we are doing a proper review of Traitors, and I doubt it's even the last time in the series that we're talking about it.
I mean, one assumes not. But hip hip hooray for terrestrial TV, but also Netflix dropping their new Harlan Coben, which is always an absolute harbinger of a new year, and is always such an enormous hit. And this one is particularly good. I've seen the first episode of this Harlan Coben, Missing You, and it's an absolute cracker, including literally in the first scene, Matt Willis from Busted.
What?
Yeah, playing like a disappointing date. I assume it's a cameo. I don't think he's coming back, He's very good. So recommendations. Let's just talk about our favourite thing of the year. I'm going to talk about my favourite TV show. There's an awful lot of things to choose from. I'm not going to say Mr. Bates versus the Post Office because we always say that. I know.
I keep saying it because it changed things.
Rivals was amazing. Ludwig was a
I loved
proper huge hit. I mean, I would put money that Ludwig will either be on Christmas Day or New Year's Day next year. That's my prediction for next year. Some great new comedy. Colin from Accounts, Alma's Not Normal. Just to give a shout out to formats, because that seems to be the bit of TV that's going away. The 1% Club goes from absolute strength to strength and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And The Assembly, which is the lovely chat show hosted just by a room of neurodiverse people. Michael Sheemer's on it this year, and hopefully they'll do a series of that next year. But I would have to say my number one series of the year is a comedy, and it's the best new sitcom I've seen for a long time, is The English Teacher, the Brian Jordan Alvarez show.
I am going to say something that is so completely obvious, but I do think that it is so phenomenal. The Eras tour for me in so many ways defined that this year, and I have to say Taylor Swift, because I find it so extraordinary that she still has this existence of one and is the most relatable woman on the planet to almost everyone. And you watch people, and she is the most sort of relatable woman on the planet to so many women and girls who watch her and feel that she's speaking directly to them, and who sang all her lyrics back at her. I think I can't really get past that in terms of a sort of cultural achievement. I don't know where she goes from here. Okay, I think that's about us, isn't it?
Yeah, Happy New Year for tomorrow.
Happy New Year. A preemptive Happy New Year to you and all of our listeners.
Yeah, we'll see you next year.
See you next year.